Tensions are rising between two of Africa's largest military powers, Egypt and Ethiopia. And at the center of this simmering conflict is water, access to the world's longest river system and one of the world's most critical sea lanes. Last month, Egypt and Somalia announced a bilateral security pact that's resulted in Cairo sending Mogadishu arms for the first time in 4 decades. The two countries will also hold military exercises later this month. And next year, Egypt could deploy troops to Somalia for the first time ever, replacing Ethiopian troops as part of an African Union peacekeeping mission against the insurgent group Al-Shabaab. Now, this Egyptian power play is more about Ethiopia than it is about Somalia. Ethiopia sees Somalia as its backyard, and Egypt wants to signal that it can undermine Ethiopia's influence in the region. So what's driving the rivalry between Egypt and Ethiopia, and why is Egypt looking to expand its influence into Somalia at Ethiopia's expense? Egypt's strategic planners would say their country has a damn big reason, a big dam. For well over a decade, Egypt and Ethiopia have had tense relations, as the Ethiopian government has constructed a massive dam on the Blue Nile, which is a crucial tributary of the Nile River that's shared by Egypt, Sudan, and other riparian countries. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, known as GERD, has caused great discomfort for Cairo. The Nile has been the lifeblood of Egypt's agrarian economy for thousands of years. It provides 95% of its fresh water, and it's inseparable from Egyptian identity and vital to its survival. But the Blue Nile begins in Ethiopia's Lake Tana, and Ethiopia has historically underexploited the river, even as it provides most of the water that flows into Egypt. The Blue Nile has great potential to not just irrigate agricultural land in Ethiopia, but also generate low-cost power through dams. And that's why Ethiopia has pushed forward with developing this $5 billion dam, a project partly crowdfunded by the Ethiopian diaspora. GERD can provide cheap electricity and energy independence for this rising African power. Cheap, reliable energy is essential for Ethiopia's ambitions to become a manufacturing powerhouse. It wants to be the next China in Africa. But Egypt fears that the Ethiopian dam could reduce the flow of the Nile, impacting not just its agricultural industry, but also its hydropower production. Now, Ethiopia and Egypt have tried to address their differences through negotiations, and mediators like the US have intervened, but to no avail. The dam's been complete for several years. It provides electricity to the Ethiopian grid, and its reservoirs are filled to most of their capacity. So Ethiopia sees GERD as a fait accompli, but the two countries still have a lot to talk about, especially on monitoring and managing the dam's usage. Egypt has been without good options to press Ethiopia, until now. It's turned to Somalia to disrupt the status quo, exploiting tensions between Ethiopia and the central government in Somalia over the breakaway region of Somaliland. And this is a conflict that also involves water. In January, Ethiopia sealed a deal with the Somaliland region to secure the right to build a naval base on leased territory in exchange for diplomatic recognition of this breakaway region. This angered Somalia, which sees the agreement as a violation of its sovereignty. No country officially recognizes Somaliland, but the region enjoys de facto autonomy and believes it has a historic claim to independence. For Ethiopia, the Somaliland deal would help resolve its strategic problem of being landlocked. Since 1993, when the country of Eritrea split from it, Ethiopia has been without a port of its own. And when war between the two countries broke out years later, Ethiopia lost access to Eritrea's Assab port. Since then, Ethiopia has depended on the tiny coastal country of Djibouti for nearly all of its maritime trade. The two countries are linked by a China-built railway. The Somaliland deal allows Ethiopia to reduce its reliance on Djibouti, and more importantly, it gives Ethiopia the ability to begin to reclaim its status as a maritime power, redeveloping its naval presence along the Red Sea, which links Asia and Europe. So it's not just economics that's driving Ethiopia's moves in the region. It also has ambitions to expand its power. Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed sees himself as a divinely chosen figure who will make Ethiopia great again. And to achieve all this, he's taken on rivals within and without, plunging the country into civil war after winning the Nobel Peace Prize in 2019. Now, Abiy Ahmed is undeterred, even after the deaths of tens, if not hundreds of thousands, in the Tigray civil war. He's keen on continuing his regional battles. Last year, he suggested that the Red Sea is Ethiopia's natural border, angering his neighbors. Prime Minister Abiy is a wild card in a region that's been ravaged by civil war and insurgencies. Now, Egypt's goals are pretty clear. It wants to signal to Ethiopia that its plans with GERD cannot proceed without cost. It's a game of leverage. And while war between the two African titans is unlikely, there's danger the region could see yet another proxy war. Other forces in the region could push it in that direction. The Horn of Africa has been the scene of growing competition between great and regional powers. The big reason? Its location. The Horn sits along the Red Sea, a critical shipping route connecting Asia and Europe, and the Bab al-Mandab, one of the world's most critical shipping choke points, is located just along the coast that separates Djibouti from Yemen. It's just 18 miles wide. Djibouti, unsurprisingly, hosts the military bases of numerous foreign powers, including the US and China. And neighboring Somalia is home to military facilities belonging to Turkey and the United Arab Emirates. Both countries are key players to watch, especially in terms of the feud between Egypt and Ethiopia. The UAE has a stake in Somaliland's Berbera port and bases in other parts of Somalia and the region. It's also a strong supporter of Abiy Ahmed in Ethiopia, and it funds militias across the region, including the RSF in Sudan, which is responsible for ethnic cleansing. Meanwhile, Turkey has a military base and security pact with Somalia. It also has good relations with Abiy, having provided him with drones in the Tigray War. And it's tried unsuccessfully to mediate between Ethiopia and Somalia. But now it's arguably on the same page as Egypt on the Somalia question. Turkey and Egypt are also now mending fences after more than a decade of tense relations because of Turkey's relationship with the Muslim Brotherhood. Egypt's President Al-Sisi just completed his first ever visit to Turkey. So, moving ahead, one key question is whether Egypt and Turkey will band together to outflank the UAE in Somalia. Or will Egypt be restrained by its economic dependence on the UAE? And will outside actors embolden or restrain local forces? The region's recent history, including Ethiopia's Tigray War and the Sudanese civil war, indicate that they're more likely to do harm than good.